So I think we're moving out of it.
Yeah, at the end of 23, I wrote this blog post from syntax to semantics. Like if you think about Python, it's taking C and making it more semantic. And LLMs are like the ultimate semantic program, right? You can just talk to them and they can generate any type of syntax from your language. But again, the languages that they have to use were made for us, not for them. But the problem is like, as long as you will ever need a human to intervene, you cannot change the language under it. You know what I mean? So I'm curious at what point of automation we'll need to get. We're going to be okay making changes to the underlying languages, like the programming languages, versus just saying, hey, you just got to write Python because I understand Python. And I'm more important at the end of the day than the model. But I think that will change. But I don't know if it's like 2 years or 5 years.
I think it's more nuanced, actually. So I think there's some of the more interesting programming languages bring semantics into syntax. So maybe that's a little reductive, but like Rust as an example. Rust is memory safe statically. And that was a really interesting conceptual break. It's why it's hard to write Rust. It's why most people write Python instead of Rust. I think Rust programs are safer and faster than Python, probably slower to compile, but like broadly speaking, like given the option, if you didn't have to care about the labor that went into it, you should prefer a program written in Rust over a program written in Python. Yeah. Just because it will run more efficiently, it's almost certainly safer, et cetera, depending on how you define safe. But most people don't write Rust because it's kind of a pain in the ass, and the audience of people who can is smaller, but it's sort of better in most ways. And again, let's say you're making a web service and you didn't have to care about how hard it was to write. If you just got the output of the web service, the Rust one would be cheaper to operate. It's certainly cheaper and probably more correct, just because there's so much in the static analysis implied by the Rust programming language that it probably will have fewer runtime errors and things like that as well. So I just give that as an example because Rust, at least my understanding is it came out of the Mozilla team because there's lots of security vulnerabilities in the browser and it needs to be really fast. So they said, okay, we want to put more of a burden at the authorship time to have fewer issues at runtime. And we need the constraint that it has to be done statically because browsers need to be really fast. My sense is if you just think about like the needs of a programming language today, where the role of a software engineer is to use an AI to generate functionality and audit that it does in fact work as intended, maybe functionally, maybe from like a correctness standpoint, some combination thereof. How would you create a programming system that facilitated that? And, I bring up Rust just because I think it's a good example of like, I think given a choice of writing in C or Rust, you should choose Rust today. I think most people would say that, even C aficionados, just because C is largely less safe for very similar, trade-offs, for the system. And now with AI, it's like, okay, well, that just changes the game on writing these things. And so like, I just wonder if a combination of programming languages that are more structurally oriented towards the values that we need from an AI-generated program, verifiable correctness and all of that, if it's tedious to produce for a person, that maybe doesn't matter. But one thing, like if I asked you, is this Rust program memory safe? You wouldn't have to read it. You just have to compile it. So that's interesting. I mean, that's like that's one example of a very modest form of formal verification. So I only bring that up because I do think you have AI inspect AI. You can have AI review, do AI code reviews. It would disappoint me if the best we could get was AI reviewing Python, and having scaled a few very large websites that were written on Python. It's just like, expensive. And it's like trust me, every team who's written a big web service in Python has experimented with like PyPy and all these things just to make it slightly more efficient than it naturally is. You don't really have true multi-threading. Anyway, it's just like clearly that you do it just because it's convenient to write. And I just feel like I don't want to say it's insane. I just mean, I do think we're at a local maximum. And I would hope that we create a programming system, a combination of programming languages, formal verification, testing, automated code reviews, where you can use AI to generate software in a high scale way and trust it. And you're not limited by your ability to read it necessarily. I don't know exactly what form that would take, but I feel like that would be a pretty cool world to live in.
Yeah, we had Chris Ladner on the podcast. He's doing great work with Modular and Mojo.
I love LLVM.
Yeah, basically merging Rust and Python.
That's kind of the idea. But I'm curious, is like for them, a big use case was like making it compatible with Python, same APIs, so that Python developers could use it. Yeah. And so I wonder at what point...
at least my understanding is they're targeting the data science, machine learning crowd, which is all written in Python. So still feels like a local maximum.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll force you to make a prediction. Python's roughly 30 years old. In 30 years from now, is Rust going to be bigger than Python?
I don't know this, but I don't even know this is a prediction. I just am sort of like saying stuff I hope is true. I would like to see an AI native programming language and programming system. And I use language because I'm not sure language is even the right thing. But I hope in 30 years there's an AI native way we make software that is wholly uncorrelated with the current set of programming languages. Or not uncorrelated, but I think most programming languages today were designed to be efficiently authored by people. And some have different trade-offs. You have Haskell and others that were designed for abstractions, for parallelism and things like that. You have programming languages like Python, which are designed to be very easily written, sort of like Perl and Python lineage, which is why data scientists use it. It has a interactive mode, things like that. And I'm a huge Python fan. So despite all my Python trash talk, I'm a huge Python fan. Wrote at least 2 of my 3 companies were exclusively written in Python. And then C came out of the birth of Unix, and it wasn't the first, but certainly the most prominent first step after assembly language, right? Where you had higher level abstractions rather than, and going beyond Go to like abstractions like the for loop and the while loop. So I just think that if the act of writing code is no longer a meaningful human exercise, maybe it will be, I don't know. I'm just saying it sort of feels like maybe it's one of those parts of history that just will sort of like go away. But there's still the role of the software engineer, like the person actually building the system, right? And what does a programming system for that form factor look like? And I just have I hope to be, just like I mentioned React. I remember I was at Facebook in the very early days and when what is now React was being created. And I remember when it was like released open source, I had left by that time. And I was just like, this is so fucking cool. Like, to basically model your app independent of the data flowing through it just made everything easier. And it now, I can there's a lot of the front end software engineering is like a little chaotic for me, to be honest with you. It's sort of like abstraction soup right now for me, but like some of those core ideas felt really ergonomic. I'm looking forward to the day when someone comes up with a programming system that feels both really like an aha moment, but completely foreign to me at the same time, because they created it with sort of like from first principles, recognizing that like authoring code in an editor is maybe not like the primary like reason why a programming system exists anymore. And I think that'll be a very exciting day for me.
Yeah. I would say like the various versions of this discussion have happened. At the end of the day, you still need to precisely communicate what you want. As a manager of people, as someone who has done many, many legal contracts, you know how hard that is. And then now we have to talk to machines doing that, and AI is interpreting what we mean and reading our minds effectively. I don't know how to get across that barrier of translating human intent to instructions. And yes, it can be more declarative, but I don't know if it'll ever cross over from being a programming language to something more than that.
I agree with you. And I actually do think if you look at like a legal contract, the imprecision